It's fire prevention, it's education, it's land use planning. It's ensuring
Ken
that,
Pimlott from CAL
we're
FIRE
looking at what
retiring
we're learning
tomorrow.
from these devastating fires in the built environment, and how do we work on those aspects as well.
You've said
Talking about the causes and effects of California's wildfires. Of course, the National Public Radio is trying to pin it all on climate change, and Ken saying, well, there's forest management aspects to the problem as well. That's what everybody's talking about. Wildfires in Northern California. Here at the Blanco Lirio Global Headquarters in Hong Kong, China, I'm putting together the pieces of a campfire update, as earlier this month I was able to get up to Chico, California, and find out how the folks are literally picking up the pieces and recovering after the campfire. My first stop was to the Silver Dollar Raceway Fairgrounds in Chico, California, to get an update on the Red Cross shelter situation. I then was able to get a great interview with Ed Mayer of the Butte County Housing Authority about the housing crisis in Butte County and the wider crisis in California. I was then able to check out one of the proposed sites for sorting out debris from the campfire, the old Diamond Match Company site in Chico, California, that has since been nixed as a dump site due to traffic concerns. There's a big problem with NIMBYism, what I call NIMBYism, not in my backyard, following the campfire. The federal government has moved in, but they're relying on local authorities to administer all the different federal programs that are available, including the locating of FEMA trailers and the removal of debris from the campfire. And the problems they're having is finding suitable locations to do these functions. Next, I got a great interview with Aaron Martin, an old dirt biking friend of mine who has worked at Planet Solar, a solar power company here in Northern California for over 19 years, with some interesting insights as to the potential future of PG&E, how all of us may become part of the power grid in the future. Right now, state lawmakers are breathing down PG&E's neck, and they're threatening to break them up. And the future of PG&E is very uncertain at this point. Then I'll tell you about a unique fundraiser that the Sierra Nevada Brewery has created for victims of the campfire. And then finally, I got a very interesting phone call from Will Tubman of the PBS Public Broadcast System NOVA program. He's been watching the videos, the Blanco Lirio videos, the flyovers specifically of the campfire. And so I signed a waiver for them allowing them to use some of that footage if they want to in their upcoming episode on the NOVA program regarding the Northern California wildfires. So let's start off at the Chico Fairgrounds for an update on the shelter situation. Before we can talk about the rebuilding of Paradise, Concow, Pulga, and other places affected by the campfire, we first got to talk about the housing crisis that is currently going on. I'm here at the Silver Dollar Raceway Fairgrounds in Chico, California, where there are still about 700 people displaced from this fire. So far, the Red Cross has got 300 folks located inside the dormitory facilities in the fairgrounds here, and they've also got a large RV park right out here, and then there's a third component, a kind of a tent city still exists on the outskirts of the fairgrounds. That tent city is being dismantled, taken apart. Those folks are getting moved into better facilities, and much of that tent city area is going to be set up as additional RV parking. So let's go check in with the Butte County Housing Director, Ed Mayer, and see what the plan is. I'm here with Ed Mayer. You are the Executive Director of Butte County Housing Authority, correct?
That's correct.
And I walked in here assuming that you were in the epicenter of this, but as you say, it's the federal government is here now.
The big dogs have walked into town. We have the Federal Emergency Management Administration, and we have the state Governor's Office of Emergency Services, who are coordinating the umbrella of the disaster response and working closely with Red Cross. The Housing Authority, obviously our concern is low-income individuals and households. We operate federal rental assistance, so we speak the language and can work very closely with our associates at FEMA and the state. But our ability to respond is very limited because we do not have affordable housing assistance that just sits here waiting to be used. And we don't have vacancy in the community for these displaced households. So the long and the short of it is we're going to see a lot of our citizenry from Butte County leaving the county.
That's the big takeaway I learned today, is that you have folks that are simply not going to be able to come back to this area.
Not in the short term. Perhaps 3-5 years down the line when the community reestablishes itself, when there's capacity here. But right now there is no housing to be had.
And this is all a bigger part of California's man-made housing shortage. It's a statewide phenomenon that this is just hugely exacerbated here.
Absolutely. We had a crisis before this began. We had a very impacted rental market here, and it's true throughout California. It's estimated there's 1.6 million units short of housing in California. So the larger tragedy here is that despite the fact we had a wildfire and there's 14,000 displaced families, there is literally no place for them to go in California because we have so abbreviated our ability to produce housing, particularly housing that's affordable to the citizens. So this is a tragedy that is worse by our own system that we've created over many years that basically prevents us from providing appropriate housing for our citizens.
That being said, we got the folks in shelter right now are down to about 700, and we're transitioning those folks. The FEMA trailers are coming they can use them for about a year or two.
Yeah, so our current, we're past the first responder stage now. Today we are focusing on developing the systems that will transition people living in the shelters elsewhere. So right now, today in our offices, FEMA and the Office of Emergency Services and Red Cross are meeting to develop their protocols for how they're going to be approaching households in the shelters and working each household individually as a case by way of finding that household's path out of the emergency shelter into some other transitional or permanent housing. So the game is on. Red Cross is only here for 60 days. We know that those shelters have to be emptied pretty much by the end of January. So we're working hard with our local service providers to help the Red Cross and FEMA develop systems to address these households.
Great.
And we have about 700 to 900 individuals over there at the Silver Dollar Fairground right now. Now, we also predict a second wave of homelessness. There's been an enormous generosity here in the county. Many people are living doubled up in families. And by virtue of the fact that up in Paradise we had lots of seniors, single seniors and disabled, many of them are now in bedrooms around the community. We think that the goodwill that gives them those bedrooms will begin to evaporate after the new year. And we'll be seeing people being displaced from their temporary residences, and many of them, again, without recourse. So I think there'll be a second wave here after the first of the year. And of course, Red Cross will be winding up its operations. FEMA will be heading out. On the other hand, we know that FEMA right now is bringing in many of their manufactured housing units. I know that last week there were 90 on the way as we spoke on Tuesday. By this week, I know that there's several sites around the county that are being developed for placement of these manufactured units. So that will help in the short term. But if those are only available for folks who qualify.
And you brought up an interesting point about how the demographics of Paradise may very well change as a result of this, because Paradise, previous to this, was a very affordable place for low-income folks to live. But now, if you want to rebuild in Paradise, you're going to have to comply with the most stringent building codes, and it's going to be expensive.
Fire-related building codes, I imagine, will be very pronounced. The expensive rebuilding for those who had good insurance, that's one thing. But for those who lived either homeless or precariously housed in Paradise, it's very unlikely they'll find a way to return.
Yeah, many of those trailer parks and that sort of thing, which got so heavily wiped out. Okay, well, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
You
Thanks
really
for being
gave
here.
me a lot of good insight on all this. All right,
Well,
thanks, sir.
Thanks for your interest. Okay.
Now, all the evacuation orders have been lifted over a week ago, and power has been restored to most all of the areas affected by the campfire. The basic plan for cleaning up is going to go something like this. The Office of Emergency Services is first going to come in with the guys in the white suits and clean up any toxic debris on each and every parcel. With or without your permission, they're going to come in and take out things like television sets, gas cans, propane tanks, oil, paint, all those sort of toxic things, and get them off of your property. Then everybody's got to get their property cleaned up all the way down to the dirt. You can either sign up for the government program by signing a waiver, and they'll come on your property and clean it up, or you got to do it yourself before you're allowed to rebuild, and that can be very expensive. The government program is basically free. If you have insurance that covers debris cleanup, the state and or government will want some of that insurance money after the fact for reimbursement. They're going to come in and take any structure bigger than a small shed that's been burned and completely remove it all the way down to the foundation, and then scrape off 2 or 3 inches of soil and test it and make sure there's no toxicity left in that soil before you're allowed to begin rebuilding. And we don't know yet how long that process is going to take. The bottom line is not everybody is going to return to Paradise. Well, more California NIMBYism right here. I'm at the end of East 16th Street in Chico, California, at the old Diamond Match Company location, now an old-time EPA cleanup site, a big, huge empty lot where a lot of the processing is going to go on. They've just decided for all the debris coming out of the campfire. The story right now sounds like they're going to take the concrete and the steel and that sort of thing, get it all sorted out here, get it shipped to here, get it sorted out here, and there's a railroad spur line where they can take that debris and get it out of here. So this will be a processing plant for much of the debris coming out of the campfire. Now, the folks are complaining about is, I think the main complaint is going to be the trucking, all the heavy trucking activity coming down this, well, it's a pretty quiet residential street right now. Maybe they got a better way to get in and out of here, but they call this Barber, but it's the old Diamond Head Match factory location in Chico, California. A neat old historic site. They got the old palm trees there, old building over there. The Diamond Match Factory was a classic company town here in Barber, California, just outside of Chico. And this big building still stands and will eventually be redeveloped, and they will preserve this building. But I want to show you some historical photographs, even though they're not going to use this site after all due to the traffic concerns. Now take a look at these forests over 100 years ago. The Diamond Match Factory ran a railroad all the way up to Sterling City. Up there in Sterling City, it was on a narrow gauge railroad to harvest the timber, transfer it to a standard gauge track, and bring it all the way down to the Barber facility in Chico, California for processing. All this timber was located on the northern edge of where the campfire burned. Now I want to jump the track here a bit and talk to Aaron Martin about the possible future of PG&E and how we may all become part of the grid. This is my old friend Aaron Martin. We're old dirt bike buddies from way back. You go riding with Aaron, you better be good. But we're here at Planet Solar. You've been here for how long now?
About 19 years now. Yeah.
And he was just telling me some new updates. Here's our little camera right over here. Some new updates with PG&E. One of the things of the campfire and all the disasters that's going on that we're all wondering is, how is PG&E going to stay in business? How are we going to get our power here in California? And a big part of that turns out to be this trend towards solar power. So initially, folks were kind of partnering up with the grid with solar panels, and how did that work?
And back in those days, it was mostly just offsetting the kilowatt hours for kilowatt hours, because there was no time of use, there was no metering going on. It was just a bidirectional meter that we would literally wind backwards and offset your costs. So when PG&E would come out in a year, go, well, they didn't even use any power. It was right where I checked it last year. Well, now with the digital meters and everything, now we're able to sell back at peak times. We've got load shaving times. We're starting to run into where they're wanting batteries on the grid just to keep it up, so that they don't have to start an emergency generator to keep the grid up right now. So we're going into the smart grid, is what it's called, the self-generation program, the SGIP, which is an incentivizing people to get not only solar power on their house, but to get battery power to be able to help save the grid. In fact, when you do go battery power with the self-gen, is that you're helping back your house up, and you're actually backing the grid up during those peak times. If we've got a lot of ACs coming on in the summer, that's when basically they might tap into your battery a little bit to help get all those ACs up and going and running, and then they'll pull back off them again, and then you'll fill them back up in the evening times. When are they in the mornings when the solar comes back up?
Your solar will charge your battery,
Right.
and so then what's going to end up saving PG&E and all of us is all of us individually working as our own little solar powered generators from our own homes. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's the future. Is we are going to be looking at renewable energy. We already know that's the future, but it only shines during the daytime. So the biggest thing is getting those batteries up there, and we're starting to see some lithium ferrophosphate stuff without cobalt that look to be 10,000 duty cycles. So we're talking about 26-year lifespan on these things. So they're out there. They're starting to get mass produced. And PG&E is just incentivizing it now with the SGIP that's starting to hit in the last couple of years, and with the fires now, I do feel for them a little bit. They've got a big grid out there that we all wanted to be plugged into, and you know what? We're all part of that grid.
We got to do something. That's going to be an amazing turnaround of events. The way what you always used to say, power to the people, right?
Power to
now
the people.
The people have got the power.
So the people, you got to kind of own your power back, or you buy into utility is what I say. Because if you're not buying into your own power, then you should be buying into PG&E and getting some of their profits then. Because if you don't invest in your own power, then they're going to be investing in it with the money you give them. So whether it be renting it or owning it, that's my big thing with the solar side of it is, a lot of us, we're just going to have a movement off grid. Well, you know what? We're not going to all live off grid. In fact, we're going to be using the grid just like an off grid battery bank one day. We're all feeding into it. Juan's going to feeds into it up on Banner. I feed into it out here. Someone's got a better solar exposure, so they've got batteries on it. And now they're going to help with that. So, I do see that it's going to be clean. It's not going to be cheap at the beginning, just like the first, microwave was $1,000.
Yeah, these first new gen batteries.
These first gen batteries, the cost is a little bit high on them, but at the same time, that's going to help when those, powers go off. Hey, you've got a brownout. That's why I think they're starting to ramp people up for this to say, proactively saying, you know what, we're going to turn the power off if there's high winds. Well, that's also getting the people that are on life support going, we can't do this. I've already gotten hundreds of people calling in saying, my son or my father or my husband is on life support. We're really scared if PG&E turns the power off because of high winds. So a lot of people are getting a quick generator for just immediate needs, and then other ones are looking at the batteries for long term. So yeah, they might turn our power off in Grass Valley when we have a high wind situation. And now Juan's got a battery pack that he can now keep his house grid going, and maybe even keep a couple homes around that area up and going. With those grids. So That's going to be the little microgrids is what we're going to see. We basically have a big grid now that just sends back in during the day with no battery backup, because it just, when the power's on and the sun's out, it's running your home and it's running your meter backwards and making credit. Well, nowadays we're going to be filling up batteries to be able to load shave on there for those little power outages, or for when the something big hits.
I wonder if in the distant future, if these giant 115,000 kilovolt transmission lines if the big old school grid will scale down considerably.
Well, and I think that's what they're going to have to put a lot of money into is their this new smart grid, because some of their old stuff isn't going to be is not going to work with it.
Now it's a matter of time. How quick can they get it done?
Right, and I think this with the fires, I think this is going to get them the incentives. This is going to get them. We've already went to Gray to go after some ratepayers to help get the grid up to 2020 here. We're almost there. I mean, it's the grid. We're hoping by 2030 that we might have enough solar to run the grid and be at net neutral. I really see that we can do it if the corporations and the power that be are behind it, and we the people get on board. Because if we don't, corporation might be 2060 before they get on board.
They get caught up.
So we've got to push corporations.
Good. Excellent. Thanks, Aaron. Man, that was a brilliant update. I have no idea all this new changes going on in solar. So go by and check out.
For keeping all of us, posted on what's happening out there.
Yeah. All right.
And ride or die.
Yeah, that's right. Get that little 200 going. PG&E is in big trouble and serious debt as a result of these wildfires and subsequent lawsuits. One thing's for sure, our rates are going nowhere but up, and these costs may very well be passed on to us as individual line items in our monthly bills. Well, after all this, I think we all need a drink. So let's head over to the Sierra Nevada Brewery for one of the coolest, unique, and effective fundraisers I've ever heard of. For victims of the Camp Fire. Here at the Sierra Nevada Brewery in Chico, California, the now world-famous brewery that brings you Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and Torpedo and a lot of other great beers. Doing reports on technical stuff and infrastructure and that sort of thing is pretty straightforward. But when you get into the human aspect of one of these disasters, it's pretty taxing. But here's a neat story from this brewery. The CEO, Ken Grossman, had donated $100,000 of his own seed money to brew up a special batch of Resilience beer, where 100% of the proceeds from this sale of this beer all goes to the Camp Fire Victims Fund. This beer is just coming on sale today, and it's going to be for sale nationwide starting next week. So get yourself some of this Resilience beer. It all goes towards the Camp Fire victims. And if you go on the Sierra Nevada Brewery website, you can see a place to donate there as well. Because it takes a little bit of this to get over some of these stories, let me tell you. See you here. Over 1,500 breweries around the world are processing this special batch with a potential to earn millions of dollars for victims of the Camp Fire. It's a good tasting ale with an appropriate amount of bitter taste. And now let's check in with Will Tubman of the PBS program NOVA. I just got an email from Will Tubman of PBS, the PBS program, Public Broadcasting Service, NOVA, the science program, one of my favorite science programs. He's seen the aerial footage over the Paradise Fire. He's asking for permission to possibly use some of that in his next production. And I think he's also using me to get a hold of Howard Goodman, the mayor of Ragdump, who has access to some of the original footage of when the fire started. So let's give him a call and see what he's up to. My hope is that they're going to do a fair and balanced, they usually do, report of the Camp Fire. My concern is that they just don't keep beating the climate change or global warming drum. There's so much more to this story. Let's see if they pull it out. See what they say. New York City. Hey, good morning, Will.
Hi.
Hey, this is Juan Brown with the Blanco Lirio channel, the aerial footage.
Yes, how are you? I was just watching one of your videos. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks for reaching out. I hope they're of some help to you guys.
Yeah, I was just flipping through them. I'm not sure how we could get them in, but maybe we can get an aerial in or something. That was kind of helpful. That was actually really great. We might want to, something from high above to get a perspective on things.
Yeah, it helps people get the big picture of just how massive this thing was.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just looking through. I saw that you might have got some shots of the ignition point too. I'm not sure how clear they were, but I was going to take a look at that too. That could definitely be helpful as well. We're trying to, we were there. We were doing actually interviews up by the car fire. We're going to interview people there when we got the call from Cal Fire that there was another fire starting. Our team ended up being there for the first 4 days of the fire.
Oh, okay. So you haven't been able to get back there after the fact and
No. We haven't been back there, and our budget-wise, we can't really make too much. We're actually based in Boston, so we can't go back too much.
Gotcha. Okay, I do have some more stills of the power line general area where they're suspecting this thing started, so I can send you what I got.
I'd appreciate that for sure. Yeah, that'd be really great. Campfire will be a big part of the story for sure, but we're, the film is more about fires in general. We look at modeling and forest management and climate and all that stuff.
Good. So many factors. That's why I was concerned.
I know. I think we need like a 3-hour film for this. That's the problem. We wanted to fit, everything in, but the viewers can only digest, so much. We can't do every single, emissions is a big part of it too, and the health, and we didn't even get to really cover that.
Yeah, and the aging infrastructure too becomes a part of it. If you get to talk about PG&E.
building and all that. So we're trying to
condense it down,
hit the big ones at least to give people a big picture idea of it.
So are you involved in the production as well, or are you the miner that's got to go get the data?
No, I was involved with the whole project.
Oh,
we're just a small company. It's just myself, Miles, and a couple other people. So
wow, and that's it. That produces a whole slick Nova production. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the editors and as well, and so we Nova hired us to make a Nova about this subject.
And then who does your voiceover? Is that somebody you hire or?
I think we don't work directly. Nova hires us to make it. So in terms of the narrate, for ours, Miles narrates ours, but they have. I think they have a roster of I think they have 2 or 3 regular people that have been doing the Nova voiceovers, from what I know.
Okay.
Ours is a little different just because Miles, and he just does it 'cause he's a correspondent.
Okay, so in this episode, we'll just be hearing Miles do the...
Yeah, you should be hearing Miles' voice.
Gotcha. Excellent. All right.
Miles O'Brien, the former CNN correspondent, now running his own production company, and who recently lost his left arm after complications from surgery after a camera case landed on it. Miles is also a pilot and owns a Cirrus aircraft.
It's going well. We're hoping to have something that Nova likes in the next couple of weeks, so hopefully it'll all come together.
Very good. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for reaching out. I'll get you some more information, and let's keep in touch.
Oh, yeah, and I appreciate your time, too. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
No sweat.
All right, take it easy.
Okay,
Bye.
talk to you soon, Will. See ya. Well, Will Tubman from PBS Miles O'Brien Production. I never knew these were such a small production team that produced these great episodes of the Nova program. And it sounds like they're going to hopefully touch on the well-rounded subject, not just beating the drum on global warming or climate change. They're looking at all the different many aspects that go into this. And it's not just about the campfire. It's going to be about Northern California fires in general. But I'm sure we'll hear more on this subject from folks like Nova. See you here.
The lady shown in the picture here was literally picking up the pieces to all that she had left after the campfire. I didn't want to interview her, but all she wanted to do was talk, and we talked for a good 30 minutes about everything that had happened. She was a renter without renter's insurance and a caregiver for a person who lived in one of the burned trailer parks who successfully reunited with her family, and so she has no one to care for at the moment. So she's staying around the shelter area here at the fairgrounds to see what kind of government programs she might apply for before she moves on with her life. So we just talked and hugged, and she's one of the many people that will not be returning to Butte County.